Dragonflies! My name is Jakari Wing, and today I'm going to be sharing a video on how I create art from an intuitive place. I feel like this process, when I use it, it works in whatever medium that I want to express in. So I am a filmmaker, I'm a photographer, I'm a musician, I DJ, and I write. I do a lot of different things, but I feel like using these 4 steps helps me stay strong to my values, helps me stay in alignment with what I want to express, and helps me feel like I can have one unique voice running throughout all the things that I do. I believe that everyone is already creating art from an intuitive place. So you're probably wondering why I would even make this video. I made it because it helps me stay in alignment with what my heart desires, which is to create art from a place of mindfulness and to be magnetic and attract the things that I want to be in alignment with, and attract the things that will help me be the best version of myself. In the first step, I like to ask myself, why am I doing this? Why am I curious about this? Why am I wanting to know more about this? Our curiosity is extremely sacred, and when we honor ourselves by asking why and when we give ourselves space to ask why, then I think we feed ourselves. We end up feeding our souls. So being aware also of your environment while you are asking the why is important, because if you're in an environment that is not encouraging you to be curious, then that might not be the most healthy or fruitful environment to be creating art from. The biggest thing about asking the why is feeling it. Get to the feeling of why. So you might not even be able to communicate like, why does this interest me? Why am I like curious about this? But if you're able to feel it in your body, then that means you're in a good place, because now you can start tuning into your senses. Number 2 in the process of creating art from an intuitive place is tuning into your senses. This is where we connect a little further with the emotion of the why. Trigger different senses to see what happens. You can ask yourself things like, what colors am I seeing? What am I feeling? What does this taste like? What does this smell like? Just different questions that trigger senses. I think this is a really great step into understanding more about how your body feels, which is great, because being in touch with our bodies also means being in touch with our intuition. The next thing that I like to do is gather the tools. And this is when I decide, what medium am I going to use? Am I going to use a camera? Am I going to use paint? Am I going to use my voice? Am I going to use random sounds that I find? What am I going to use to create a sort of structure around these feelings? And this can be the most exciting part, because you have to just go with the feeling that you felt when you were first initially triggered. So that feeling of when you tune into your senses, that feeling is going to kind of be like your blueprint into how you gather your tools. If you pick something up and it feels good, then keep doing it. If you pick something up and it doesn't feel good, then just leave it and leave it for another time. But this is how I gather the tools. By the time you have gone through that process, hopefully you're now ready to create the art. I like to believe that those 3 steps that I mentioned are how you can tend to your creative hygiene, how you can keep your river flowing, how you can maintain your curiosity, and how you can maintain your unique vision. When we're creating the art, I feel like this is a pretty meditative practice, because you can allow the things that you were questioning when you were asking why, when you're tuning into your senses, when you're figuring out what tools you wanted to use. This is the point where I feel like the meditative part of art kind of like comes through, because it just flows, and at this point your body just kind of takes over and does whatever. So I feel like these 4 steps are great, because they can activate the mind enough to trigger the body to be like, okay, we're ready to make art. I want to share an example of how I did this with some experimental video art. I made this video called Dear River, where I spoke to a river, and I created video art from that conversation. First thing I did was lean into the why. I was walking next to this river almost every single day, and I was sitting with the river and watching it and feeling it and kind of letting just my imagination flow. And I started to feel like an intense curiosity, and I didn't know how to communicate it. So I thought, why not just keep leaning into this why? I leaned into the why, and I began tuning into my senses. In this case, I was tuning into my hearing. I was able to have a pretty sensory experience from just being around the river. So at this point, I feel like I had triggered my sixth sense because I was having a conversation with the river, and I was talking to the river about ancient beings, fantastical beings, etc. We were having a ball. We were going everywhere, and I loved it. And I wanted to share this experience, so I decided to gather my tools and create the art. The way I gathered the tools was I decided to use video, and I went out to the river and I recorded just an experience of me meditating with the river. I did what I had been doing when I was tuning into my senses and being curious, and I just filmed, and I kind of just allowed whatever to happen. It was kind of hard to let go of that control because when I'm thinking about filming, I'm always having so many ideas about what is next, and in this case I just let the camera roll. And I also used a camera that I don't normally use, so that kind of helped me just kind of get lost in being present but then also filming. By the time I was creating the art, I had done that in the editing room. I got really experimental with it, and I just let whatever I felt when I was meditating next to the river take over, and I just allowed however I was feeling to come across. So the way I made my decisions in the editing room was based on how I was feeling when I was meditating by the river, how I was feeling when I was tuning into my senses. And I feel like I had spent almost 2 weeks meditating with the river, or spending time with the river, and so it was a significant amount of time in order for me to get to a place where I could just have my body memorize what had happened and just create from that place. And I ended up creating a really beautiful experimental video that I really, really love and cherish, and it feels so fantastical. It feels really beautiful, and it feels so peaceful whenever I watch it. And that video kind of inspired me to share this process, how I ended up creating my art from an intuitive place. I think there's something really special about being able to take care of our creative hygiene, create art, and find balance and flow in that. It, for me, is how I have been learning to harness my inner voice and to share my inner voice and to share who I really am, or who am I? I'm definitely always asking that question, but yeah, I think creating art from a mindful place for me means creating art from an intuitive place. And if I can just maintain mindfulness throughout my practice, then I can harness my inner voice. And I really feel like ever since I was able to verbalize and kind of gather the tools on how to create art from an intuitive place, I'm allowing that to seep into all my practices, and I feel like my vision feels a little bit more defined, or I feel like I have more structure. I want to share some books that have really helped me. One is Women Who Run with Wolves. I could probably do a whole video about that book, which I might. Could even do chapter breakdowns, because I love that book, and I oftentimes go back to it to reference anything I need help with. Another book I really like is, let me see, The Artist's Way. I think that's a really great book to kind of work through the practice of being an artist. And then The Alchemist is a great book. I feel like that book reminded me of my purpose, and I think in my art practice I like to know what my purpose is, so having a book like The Alchemist really helps. And finally, this is just a personal favorite, Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Ursula Grit. I'm gonna butcher it. But I really love that story because I'm all about the hero stories that are on their like personal little journey, and it's fantastical and like sci-fi, and I love all that. So yeah, having books really helps, and having music, playlists, whatever. Like the biggest thing is just staying curious for me, and I still struggle with that. But I started this YouTube channel because I feel like it allows me to feel curious, and I love the self-help community on YouTube, and I want to be a part of it. But anyways, thank you for tuning. Please like and subscribe. Bye bye dragonflies. I'll see you next time. I did not. I did not stretch my vocal cords.